Right.
We're good.
Good evening, everybody. Welcome to the Finance Rebel Show. Today, we are having a very, very special show, a show I've been planning for quite some time. Tonight, we are going to be talking about starting and sustaining your nonprofit. There are a lot of people out there with nonprofits. There are a lot of people out there with nonprofits that want to do good in the community, but a lot of times they don't have the resources and the expertise that they actually need to get them going up and right. So I went and recruited my good friend, Lawanda Horton Sauter, who is the president and CEO of Mission Incorporated. All she does is nonprofits all day long for the last 2 decades, I want to say. Say hello to everybody, Lawanda.
Hi. Hello, everyone.
So I think I kind of messed up the one part. How long have you been working in the nonprofit sector?
Okay, I don't need you out here telling people that I'm old enough to be doing anything for 2 decades, but actually, it's close. So I've been in the field for 18 years.
So we might as well round up.
2 years shy of 2 decades. But I've been president and CEO of this company for 11, which is well beyond the 3 years when the 3 year period when most small businesses die. So I feel comfortable and good to be dealing in 3 times that amount of time. And so yeah, I've been doing this for a while, and this is the only thing that I've ever done.
This is the only thing you've ever done. Oh, wow.
Yeah, so I started my career here, and will likely end my career here.
Okay. So as we start, can you tell everybody what a nonprofit is?
Yeah, so I do a lot of trainings. Actually, I have a very popular training called The Art of the Start, and it's how to start a nonprofit or small business. One of the things that I say in the beginning is that you can really distinguish a nonprofit from a for-profit by determining what the purpose of the organization is. So if the organization exists for your own private benefit as a person, chances are that it's a for-profit entity. But if the organization exists for the benefit of the community at large, then you really should be setting yourself up as a nonprofit because you can access other sources of revenue and support.
Okay. And can nonprofits make money?
Yes. A lot of people think that if you're a nonprofit means that there's no profit involved. But nonprofit organizations are called nonprofits because of what happens with the profit. So in a for-profit, after you pay taxes, the profit can be given to you as the owner, and you can go out and buy a new Lamborghini with it. But in a nonprofit, if at the end of the year you perform really well, the money has to go back into the organization. So it's just how the money is used once it comes in at the end of the year. Nonprofit organizations shouldn't really have anything extra. They should be using whatever is quote unquote extra to improve, air conditioning, to purchase new textbooks, to provide lower level staff with better, salaries or benefits. But you can't take, I guess, what comes in at the end of the year that's extra and just keep increasing your own individual salary year
Right.
after year.
It's not for your own personal benefit.
Yeah, but you can, you can get a salary working for a nonprofit, but the salary should be comparable to the amount of money that executive directors or program directors or whatever would make in other nonprofits.
Okay. Because that's one of the questions I get all the time. So now you did say something. You said they shouldn't be really making a whole lot of extra money, but United Way, Red Cross, a lot of times they still have surplus at the end of the year. Correct?
Yeah, but they have to have a plan for rolling that into something.
Well,
so, yeah,
go ahead. No, go ahead.
So they may have it physically, but it's already spent.
It's earmarked.
Yeah,
There's a budget. There's a budget going forward for that money.
Right.
Okay.
Because the issue is, if a funder gives you money and gives you $10,000 and you have $5,000 left over, the funder will look at that and say, we should give you 5,000 less next time.
Right. Sometimes, yeah.
So
Yeah.
so you need to have a plan for allocating that money to something.
Okay. Okay. So what are some of the most common mistakes that people have when they run nonprofits and start nonprofits?
Okay, I don't know if you have enough time for this.
Well, dry me out.
You told me to keep it 100. So
Want it?
I would say that the first mistake I think people make is understanding what a nonprofit is and what it's for. So like some people view the nonprofit as like the next step past when their benefits run out and they've applied to like, social services too many times and they can't get what do you call it? SSI and stuff no more. Like people think the nonprofit is like the next step in the hustle, that they want to come and they want to like start one of these organizations because they're like, cool, the government and grant funders and stuff will pay me to create my own business where I'm in charge and all I got to do is pretend to help people in the neighborhood, which I kind of want to do anyway. So I think people think that, but they don't understand that if you're not ready to work, this is not the industry for you. This is like, I feel like people of color are the best people to run these organizations a lot of the time because we know how to do something with nothing. And so like we know the struggle of having to take a little bit from this bill to make that bill, straight for this month. And that is the grind of the nonprofit organization. So if you're thinking that you're going to come in, you're going to be comfortably rich and stuff, that's not how it's going to work. You're going to be constantly looking for new streams of revenue, worrying about the funder that you have that has changed their mind about how much they're given this year. It's just this constant battle and challenge to maintain, your revenue levels. So I think that's one of the major mistakes that people make, or miscalculations they make in deciding to go this route.
What about overall business model, right? Because everybody I talk to always says they're going to get grants when they go into becoming a nonprofit. And I always say, well, grants are kind of like the icing on the cake. I believe everybody should have their own business model when they start a nonprofit, meaning their own way of making money outside of grants.
Yeah, I think a lot of what surprises folks who get into this is that they look at grant funding as like sort of the end all be all, and they don't look at any of the other streams of revenue. There are a number of other ways to get money in your nonprofit, and grant funding is not the easiest way. It's not really the most reliable way, not the most reliable source of funding. It's very time consuming, and there's going to be a lot of rejection involved in the early stages because, one, people go after grant funding long before they actually should be, and also once they do it, they're not really being deliberate or well researched in who they go after for funding. So,
Now, you said there are other sources of revenue for nonprofits. What are they?
okay, so to go down the list, they are things like annual funds or individual giving. Annual fund is a form of individual giving where you would send a letter out once a year to, in the old school days, a mailing list with stamps, but nowadays stamps are getting too expensive and a lot of folks are doing this via email. But annual fund or individual giving, as it's known, is actually one of the largest sources of funding for a nonprofit organization. I think something like 72 or 79% of all contributions to nonprofit organizations came from individuals. And churches are a wonderful model for that because churches get that money from you every week when they pass around that collection plate. They have one of the most solid individual giving models like in in play, right? So individual giving is one way. Individual giving is any contribution that's given to you by check, cash, or at a special event. So if people buy tickets to special events, that would fall underneath the category of individual giving.
And if people want to send money through PayPal, Cash App, Venmo, or what are the other new ways of transferring money, that would still be considered individual giving, correct?
Yeah, it would still be considered individual giving.
Okay.
Then there's what's special events. So special events are another fundraising tool, but special events is different from individual giving when you look at the money that comes from things outside of ticket sales. So outside of ticket sales, you can do things like auctions at an event. Um, so through in-kind contributions, you can have an auction. That would be considered special events revenue. Special events revenue is also corporate sponsorships that come to support a specific event. So that would be considered special events revenue, but also sort of corporate sponsorship since it's coming from corporations. So speaking of which, corporate sponsorship is another source of revenue for nonprofit organizations, and corporations are interested in getting their brand in front of your constituents or the people that you serve. They're interested in getting their brand in front of their eyeballs, and so a lot of people like to think of the corporate nonprofit relationship as one where like these corporations like really care, and it's usually not. That's usually, I mean, they can have a founder or an executive or whatever that cares about a particular issue, and that's usually the issue that they will support the most.
Right.
But it really is just like everything else in our country, a transaction. So they really want it's important for them to be able to get their brand in front of as many eyeballs as possible, which is why if your organization only serves 5 people, you're not going to do very well getting corporate sponsorships.
Plus, it's a tax write-off for them.
Yeah, they can get a tax write-off, but I think that again, they're going to try to go for the maximum benefit so that if they can kill 2 birds with 1 stone,
Absolutely.
get the write-off and the eyeballs, they're going to try to do that to the farthest extent possible.
Absolutely.
They also have something called it's EITC, but it's not the Earned Income Tax Credit. It's something. It's got the same name, but it's for businesses or corporations, and a lot of them are a member of that program, and that's where they try to spend down their extra money at the end of the year and give it to nonprofits. But the nonprofits, to a certain degree, through that program, are pre-qualified because they've gone through like this whole process. So it's easy and safe places to give your money so that you don't find out at the end of the year that you just, gave to. I would say what I'm thinking, but
please be candid. This is a friendly place. Think of it like being home.
See, I know they're going to come for me, but I was going to say so that you won't be giving to Dr. Umar's School of Wayward Boys. But I'm saying that a lot not having this.
You trying to start all the trouble. Okay.
He needs to hire me. Seriously, there's a lot of stuff he's doing wrong. But they need to have this kind of stuff in place. So, like I said, somebody like him, he might lose the opportunity to access certain kinds of funding because he's not listed as one of the EITC, approved. I mean, all of these kinds of things that they don't tell us about, basically.
Right. But isn't corporate sponsorship almost just like getting a grant?
Yeah,
in terms of the processing.
Yeah, it's similar. I would say that for me, the difference between corporate sponsorship and grant funding is the length and depth of the application.
Okay.
So a corporate sponsorship application is usually not as extensive as an application for a grant, and the amounts are smaller. So a corporate sponsorship might be a great way for a nonprofit to enter into a relationship with Verizon, because Verizon can tap into its advertising budget. and give them a grant that applies underneath that category. And there might not be as many hoops to jump through as there are for when Verizon gives out a grant. So the application is going to be heavier for a grant proposal.
Gotcha. If you're just joining or if you're watching on replay, my name is Kamari Ellis. You're watching the Finance Rebel Show. Tonight, we are joined by Lawanda Horton Sauter, who is a nonprofit expert. That's all she's ever done. She's been doing it for almost 2 decades. She won't let me say 2 decades because she doesn't want to tell her age. She's been doing it for almost 2 decades. And, I've been in the accounting and finance field. And so I've worked with nonprofits. And when I first met this lady, I said, oh my God, I'm in love. She's saying all the things that I can't say to many of my nonprofit clients. So from there, we developed a relationship. And that's why I brought her on tonight, because there are a lot of misconceptions in the community about nonprofits. There's a lot of misconceptions in the community about the business structure or lack thereof a business structure that's needed in nonprofits. So I just wanted to come on and have a conversation about what we should be thinking about when we start a nonprofit, what we need to have in place when the nonprofit is ongoing, what we need to also put in place to make sure it continues to go forward so it can be sustainable, not just for this one time and this one period in time or this one generation, but for generations and generations to go forward, because the nonprofits are definitely needed in, my community, right? I don't know who's going to be listening, but, a lot of times when I do these shows, I'm speaking to my folks specifically. So they're needed. A lot of times we have a lot of food deserts. A lot of times there are food banks that could qualify to become nonprofits or that are nonprofits, but they might need a little help with their overall structure. Programs for youth and for children, something else is very much needed, and especially in urban communities. Many times they run as nonprofits. A lot of times they don't have a lot of money because they don't have a fundraising strategy, or they don't really have a business model. So these are the things that I really wanted to talk to with Lawanda, so we could really get some more of this information out. So feel free, please share this with people that you know or that are thinking about starting a nonprofit or that have a nonprofit. So grant writing, annual events.
There's another one.
Okay.
So grant writing, individual giving, events, corporate sponsorship. There's also something called earned revenue. Earned revenue is a way for a nonprofit to engage in for-profit like activities.
My favorite one.
But it's directly tied to their mission. So what I mean by that is, if a nonprofit organization serves people with disabilities and they open up a bowling alley, and people with disabilities work in the bowling alley as a way of obtaining like life and occupational skills, then the nonprofit then operates a regular bowling alley. People pay for the shoes, they pay to bowl, they pay probably about the same amount that they would pay at any other bowling alley. And the funds go to paying the individuals with disability their salaries. It goes towards fixing up the bowling alley if, a lane is broken or out of repair, and can go toward the operations of the nonprofit organization that runs both the bowling alley and a series of other programs. So as I mentioned earlier, when we discussed what happens with the money at the end of the year when a nonprofit has extra, that nonprofit would have to provide an increase in salary to the people with disabilities, or fix up the bathrooms at the bowling alley, buy new shoes. They would spend that money down. But that's them engaging in that kind of activity. So you can't like open up a record store, right, and just sell records and say I'm nonprofit, because these artists are artists that would not have traditionally been heard by anyone else, unless
they are blind,
right? Yeah, unless
some other
those
learning
artists.
disability.
I mean, a large percentage of what you do inside this record store would have to be to the benefit of those artists. They'd have to be making money basically there every day. You'd be housing some upstairs in your apartments. Like, there'd have to be a whole bunch of stuff happening to benefit those artists. And you'd also have to establish that they are a part of a particular group that's at risk. You know, you got to make the case for this kind of stuff.
Yeah, but let's say you have an art program and you have children in your art program, and the children make phenomenal art. They draw all kinds of stuff. They draw comic book characters that are very much like your Marvel and DC characters, and they sell those. That could be part of the overall business model.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, so if you have a cooking program for cooking deserts, right? If you wanted to do, I don't know, sell dinners, right? Our community sells dinners. They wanted to sell dinners on a Friday night. That money could go towards the running of the nonprofit, correct?
Yeah. You're touching on an important point. It's that it needs to be related.
Yes.
To your stated charitable purpose. So your stated charitable purpose would be whatever is on your articles of incorporation or on the paperwork that you filed to become a nonprofit. If it's outside of that charitable purpose, then it could be questioned by the IRS as for-profit activity, and you could be no longer tax exempt.
Yeah, they call it non-related
business income.
Yes. And what happens in those cases is you have to pay tax on that money.
Yeah.
And, you know, a lot of nonprofits, i.e. some of our churches, are notorious for this because they don't really get audited. They kind of fly underneath the radar and they do all kinds of things. Like, you know, a lot of churches own land and real estate. Now, they don't have to file tax on that activity as long as it falls under that. But many of them have real estate that they rent out, and it's to anybody. It's not necessarily tied into the mission, like you were talking about, the mission of the church. They're not housing, you know, the priest or visiting pastors or things like that. It's just purely for profit motive.
Yeah, and that's why people can't look at themselves as like a world outside of the world. Like, they have to pay attention to what's going on in our country on a larger scale, because things like the scandal around the Trump Foundation or whatever, things like that will change the level of scrutiny nonprofit organizations and foundations get in the future. And so if you've been practicing not doing things the right way for years,
you see, I'm
suddenly
thinking you're going to go somewhere.
Since you work with tax stuff, you know that the IRS changes its rules or, you know, line items on their paperwork and stuff, like at the drop of the hat. They're like, it's January 2018. We're no longer accepting this particular thing as proof of residencies. Like, that'll happen, and all of the people who submit their stuff in that little window of time where they maybe missed, you know, that new announcement, all are now not in compliance. So it could change overnight. You know, there could be some kind of like court case where, you know, they find all of these loopholes and problems with that allowed Trump Foundation to do a whole bunch of different stuff, and then change the rules for nonprofits in general, and all the ones who have been operating sort of really lazily are suddenly closed.
Well, yes and no. I mean, the IRS has to operate within the law. So they're enforcing within the law. What they will do is, so for example, a couple of years ago, and you know this, they started enforcing nonprofits who were kind of like these shell nonprofits, and they started making them file taxes, file tax returns. When before they weren't required to do so because they were beneath a different type of threshold. They were beneath a certain monetary threshold. So yeah, they'll do something like that. But usually, if there's any major change, it's usually kind of you can see it coming. It's leading up, and you'll have enough time to kind of prepare. But you know, to a certain degree, you know, I agree, because again, they may reinterpret how that law is to be enforced. And so it might change, or they have to adjust to the climate. Again, there's so many nonprofits on the books, but there's so many nonprofits that actually are not operating. It boggles my mind.
And I found out recently, because I pulled the list of nonprofits that lost their 501c3 status, and there are like major institutions that you and I know that do not have a 501c3 right now. and are operating under grants, contracts, all kinds of things that were contingent upon them having that status.
Well, sometimes people get behind in their tax filings, right? I believe it's if you miss 3 years consecutively, you automatically lose your status.
Yeah, you get stripped.
Right.
So,
So maybe they're reapplying. Hopefully they're reapplying.
yeah,
Hopefully.
yeah.
Hopefully. So okay, so we got funding sources. Okay, you said individual and annual funding sources, special events, and you also said business related income. Is there anything else that
Corporate
corporate
sponsorship.
sponsors, right? Corporate sponsors.
Not nonprofit organizations can go after government contracts. That process would be very similar to your grant application. It'd be really heavy, and a lot of the times they can go after government contracts when the area that the government is looking for support in is an area that the nonprofit organization has demonstrated they're able to like meet the needs. So if a bunch of people with mental health issues get displaced from a state institution, and me and five other people have homes that were already operating that serve that need, and we got beds open, we might be able to access government, city, state, or federal funds to support putting those people who were displaced from the institution into our beds.
Now, how would somebody know that the opportunity has arisen?
It's tough. I think that our local leadership doesn't do a very good job at making people aware of these opportunities. But I know that like e-contracts Philly is where a lot of these RFPs are. And you would want to just maybe, I know that the state representative's office puts out like a grants book. So that's a good way to kind of access those things. Listservs, going to the how to doing business in Philadelphia, those contract like events will
What about if
sometimes.
they're not in Philly though? Because everybody that's on this live, I know there's some people that are actually in Virginia. So
Yeah, you would just want to ask like whoever your representative is at federal, state, and city level what opportunities, because they're all different. So um, they might have different opportunities at the different levels. But generally, you need to have all of your business paperwork in order and stuff to access those, and you need to be prepared to write a to respond to an RFP, which is you know pretty usually a
request for
pretty.
proposal, right?
Yeah, request for proposal. They're also called like a bunch of other things.
Yeah, RFQ,
Requests for
RFI.
qualifications, request for information. They call them a lot of things, but usually if it's RF and something else, it's a RFA is request for application. Yeah, so that's another way that organizations can access funding.
Okay. Okay. So then let's say, we've got a nonprofit, we got some funding. Now, how are we supposed to operate this nonprofit so we can deliver on the offer that we got the money for? So basically,
Yeah.
how can we operate and be within compliance and actually do a good job, right? Because
Yeah.
we should be seeking to give value and deliver value, even though it's a nonprofit, right?
Yeah. So one of the things I do with my clients before we even attempt to access funding is I bring the group of stakeholders, whoever is involved in their organization, their board of directors, any volunteers they feel are, this would be relevant to. We bring them together in what we call a development plan facilitation. And what that is just, it's basically giving them a nonprofit 101 and then asking them a bunch of questions about their organization that they either can answer or can't answer. And for the questions that they aren't able to answer, those then become sort of action items, things that they need to do to move forward. But I think everything begins with your mission statement, which should be one sentence long. And if
Why
you
one
have
sentence?
yes, this is a deeper conversation, but your mission statement should be one sentence long. It should be really succinct. You can offer more information about yourself in the conversation that follows the mission statement, but the mission statement itself as an industry thing Like, people will be able to tell whether or not you are new to this by how long your mission statement is. It's sort of one of those. It's what sort of one of those secret qualifiers or disqualifiers that they use. And so, mine, for example, which just changed recently, is to start, grow, and find funding to support nonprofit organizations and community coalitions. And it's just a general statement of what it is that I do. And then beyond that, I need to sort of set up how I'm going to do that, right? So if people want to run strong, sustainable nonprofit organizations, they begin with a mission statement, then they break down the way in which they're planning to execute that mission statement. Then they set up sort of a calendar for when they're going to do those things. And then they and their board come together at the end of the year to determine whether or not they've met those goals.
What if there's no board?
There has to be.
I've run across nonprofits where there's no board.
Yeah, that's if they're a 501c3 or any kind of nonprofit tax exempt organization and they don't have a board, they're operating outside of the law. They're supposed to be checked by a board, which is a cross section of community stakeholders, because a nonprofit organization does not belong to an individual. It belongs to the community and needs to be checked by a group of individuals that can oust the founder and executive director if need be for buying Lamborghinis with the extra money that was left over at the end of the year. So if they have a 501c3 status, and again, you touched on something earlier about how they're not really being watched by government agencies. The nonprofits aren't being sort of like watched the same way that like small businesses are, in the sense that if you're a small business and you're not paying your taxes, you're more likely to be found out not doing that if you're a small business than if you're a nonprofit that doesn't have a board, right? So because the IRS doesn't have the staffing to be able to really check on that.
See, now you letting the cat out the bag. See, I don't even tell people that because then they want to get slick.
Yeah,
say,
please don't do this, because
if they don't have the staffing, then I can just go ahead and just write off my kitchen sink and my cat, my dog.
You know they're hearing that. You know they're hearing that, Kamari, but that's not what we're saying.
I know.
There isn't the kind of oversight for nonprofit organizations, but they really, if that's what the books say. The law says that you have to have a board. Preferably a board not comprised of your family members, because these are the individuals who are deciding upon your salary, whether or not you are, in compliance with the bylaws and everything. So it really shouldn't be, if you're going to have family members on your board, you should be able to make the case for why they're on there. So like Kamari, if you were my brother, I would say Kamari is on the board because he has a background in accounting and finance, and I can access that talent from him for free versus hiring an accountant and that's assuming that me and Kamari have a good relationship where I'm at.
Listen, people don't like me on their nonprofit boards.
So,
I get in trouble when I've lost relationships over that.
So these organizations should have a board. And if it ever comes down to it where they are found out, it could spell really big trouble for them, because not only should they have a board, they should have a certain number of times a year that board is meeting, and they should have an annual meeting that is open to the public where, the public can view their financials and what they've been doing for the year. And sometimes that's not an annual meeting. Sometimes that's just an annual report, but they have to have some way for the public to see what they've been accomplishing.
Right, because you always want to have an air of transparency anytime you're operating with public money. And essentially nonprofits, it is public money. Lawanda mentioned earlier that no one owns a nonprofit. The nonprofits actually belong to the people. Some nonprofits have more access than others for various reasons, but generally, either on their website or somewhere, you should be able to get a sense of transparency and see where the money is being spent. Because I know, one thing a lot of people complain about is super high administration fees. So a lot of the money goes to the administration, and not a lot of the money that's being donated and given is getting to the actual cause of the people who need these services or products or whatever it may be.
Yeah, that's actually one of my biggest pet peeves, and to a certain degree, the catalyst behind me starting Mission Incorporated was because, despite the fact that about 90 something percent of the people nonprofits serve are people of color represent very little, if even 20% of the leadership of these organizations.
Mhm.
And so that's been a problem for me, and so I've been working to kind of change that by providing professional development to future nonprofit leaders of color, and also getting some of these donors and some of these foundations and stuff to step up and help people make change at a community level, because these larger nonprofits at 16th and JFK are getting a lot of the funding, right? I ain't
Mhm.
talking about nobody in particular. I'm just saying.
You just went to 16 JFK, right?
Yeah,
Right across from City Hall.
at 16th and JFK, they're getting the funding, right? And then they're taking that money and spending it on executive salaries and on people not of melanin working in many of the positions. And then they are partnering with people in the Northwest, in Germantown, in North Philly, smaller organizations run by people with plenty of melanin. And those people are getting paid nothing but the partnership and the photo op. And so my job really has been to say, like, look, I service all of those small organizations that are actually doing the work. And they have a right to that funding because they are the ones actually executing. And so that's part of the disruption, I think. We've
But
been
let's
doing.
peel that back a little bit, because that's a bit of an onion, right? So what you're saying is a lot of times these bigger nonprofits will get funding, get grants, because they have access to many of the giving sources. They have they have a longer track record.
Mm-hmm.
They have more relationships in these spaces. And so they will partner with some of these nonprofits in the community
Mm-hmm.
who are actually doing the work. I mean, am I following this correctly here?
Yeah, because the people who are in need don't have tokens.
Right. So
Just
no,
at 16th
I
and
just want
JFK.
I just want everybody to understand what you're saying, right? So they then partner the smaller nonprofits that are actually doing the work in the community, partner with these larger nonprofits, and they get a piece of the money. Sometimes not as much of the money that they actually need to do the work that they're doing. And they are there for the photo op and many of the other things. But again, the money stream or the division of the money isn't fair.
Mm-hmm.
Oftentimes, that's what
Yeah.
you're talking about, correct?
And 9 times out of 10, they're not accessing any of that money at all.
Mm.
They're like, oh, I'm doing such and such with such and such. And I'm like, how much are you getting? They're like, nothing. They're like, but it's good to have their name behind me. And like, you wouldn't believe how many times I actually hear that. So, what people don't realize is that a lot of our city is operating off of the blood, sweat, and tears of people who aren't getting a dime to do the work
Mhm.
and none of the credit.
Right, right.
So they just get to go around like the hood and tell everybody that they're working with, this museum or, or that agency, but it's not translating into jobs for these people who are doing all this work. It's not translating into anything more than a bag of groceries for the person who they're serving,
Mhm.
not a job to actually get their own groceries, just a bag of groceries. And so, like I said, we've been really for 11 years now, like disrupting that.
So everybody, if you're just now tuning in or you're watching the replay, you're watching the Finance Rebel Show. Tonight's guest is Miss Lawanda Horton, Lawanda Sauter Horton. I just jacked your name up. I'm sorry.
Horton Sauter.
Horton Sauter. Thank you. From Mission Incorporated. She's been in business for many, many years, helping and guiding nonprofits to make sure that they can bring money in, keep money in, and serve the community. If you know somebody who needs information about nonprofits, please share this with them. Please, please, please share this with them. I know there's plenty of groups on Facebook who talk a lot about business and nonprofits. They need to see this conversation. So please share this with them. We're going to open this up for a live Q&A. So if you have any questions, throw them in the Q&A box and we will highlight them on the screen and we will also address them. So in all these years, almost 18 years, might as well say 20 years that you've been doing this, what's some of the craziest things you've ever seen?
Oh my God. Craziest? I would have to say that I had the executive director of a Black run 100% Black serving nonprofit tell me that we needed John Bon Jovi for an event.
Wait a minute. So serving, like when you say serving, just serving the Black community?
Serving 100% people of color, Black people, specifically Black people.
Okay, so they wanted Bon Jovi
to perform at the gala.
At the gala. Now, were they marketing to non-Black folks to get higher tickets?
They weren't making a reasonable decision based on who actually attends their event year after year, and they were just kind of coming up with names of people they thought had deep pockets, and it was just kind of like, this doesn't. There are plenty of like artists and professionals and celebrities of color that have roots in the Philadelphia area that would seem like a much better fit for a Black organization. That
No, but that wasn't what I was trying to get to the heart of the situation. I know where you're going, but was their thought they were going to sell these tickets to Bon Jovi fans? Was that their thought?
I think that, they probably thought they were going to expand their donor base and the people that they were connecting with. But again, Black is in their name. I won't say much more than that. And so that just wasn't going to happen unless there was a full-on like name change / redirection of their entire mission, etc. It just wasn't correct.
Right.
I think the other thing that I've seen is like, people who have gone to jail for mismanaging nonprofit funds attempt to come back into the fold and get promptly told by me that I want nothing to do with it.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen a few things, but I think that one of the craziest people that is probably running around Philly, anybody who's running around Philly, there's probably like 5 people who are running around Philly saying bad things about me. That's like, there's only 5, but I can tell you that each one of those people is not stable. Like this one particular woman, right? Because we do good work here and we're very honest. And if we make a mistake, we are forever in service to you to correct said mistake, which is very rare. But I had one woman tell me that she didn't like my energy because she wanted to start a nonprofit where people whose homes were at risk all put their money into a pot and they paid off one person's home at a time.
So she wanted to do a sue for foreclosure?
I was like, child, this is not going to work. If I'm 7th in line and I just watched 4 or 5 people's houses get paid off, like, why am I still putting money in this overall pot? And I try to say this to her in the gentlest way possible. And she told me that she didn't like my energy and was going to tell people all over the city that about
you know what's so funny though? I've never been told they don't like my energy. because my first thought was, well, maybe they should get some sage and sage me.
Yeah.
But many people don't trust, right? Many people in our community don't trust. Many times they feel that because, we might go certain places or have access to certain places that they don't, they don't feel that we're an ally to the community. And if we disagree with them, they'll say, oh, you just been hanging out with white folks too long.
Yeah, or you're crabbing and barreling me.
Right. And it's really sad because a lot of times, a lot of us, right, I can't speak for everybody, but a lot of us really have nothing but the best of intentions when working with many of these organizations. We kind of do it a lot of times out of love, right? Because many times the money isn't right.
Right, right.
And then to be told, you're caping for the white man or whatever is like a double insult. And it's just like, I can't believe just because what you're telling me isn't going to work in this scenario.
Right, right.
And I do run into that a lot.
Come up, I'm coming up off of your come up.
Right.
So it's in my best interest as a business owner to want you to succeed. And so, we're not going to go out here or go outside just looking like any old kind of thing together. Right. So for me, that's if a lot of people who like working with me, and I would have to say, Kamari, 70% of our business comes from people who already worked with us, telling other people about us. So this lady is not the norm, but they like working with us because they know, all right, what do you think about this, Lawanda? Right? They know they're gonna get kind of the real answer.
Right. So one more question before we go to Q&A. Succession planning. Oftentimes, I don't really see a lot of our organizations thinking, moving, implementing, and talking about succession planning. Are you experiencing the same thing, or?
Yes. So in the nonprofit industry specifically, they are talking about this thing called the leadership gap. And they're saying that because baby boomers are in their late 60s, 70s, a lot of them, they're leaving the workforce. And that because there wasn't a whole lot of effort on their part to engage in the kind of leadership development, professional development, or succession planning that was necessary, that all of a sudden, all of these nonprofit jobs are going to open and there isn't going to be anybody to actually lead. So they're worried about those agencies shutting down. It's even worse, Kamari, if you think about our community, because the leaders of nonprofit organizations run by people of color, and even just political posts and stuff, they're really not doing what they should be doing to pass the torch. I mean, some of us haven't gotten the torch and we're in our 40s and had to start businesses because they never came around the track with the baton, right? So there's going to be a whole nother leadership crisis once we're all in our 60s because we got the baton so late. We didn't have time to teach anybody behind us what to do. So I think it's important for you and I to be having videos like this that hopefully younger people can access. Somebody saw me in a video like this that was on YouTube, and she's down in Florida and 16, and she called me a couple of weeks ago and asked me to be her mentor. So there's so I mean, we have to be doing this kind of stuff because the leadership gap in the nonprofit sector is no joke. But especially all of those positions of color that were hard fought here in Philadelphia, all those leadership positions that were hard fought, we are about to lose all of those because in other communities, they are training their young people. They are training 26-year-old, operating managers and stuff in nonprofits right now who are not of color, who are making 65, 70,000 a year to move right into those positions because they've got no competition.
I mean, there's many people that say, and this isn't just for nonprofits, right? This is across the board. Mm-hmm. An organization is an organization if it's not planning for succession, right? So everybody knows succession, or everybody should know succession planning is a very, very, very key activity for any organization. And when you start, you have to be thinking about it. And a lot of times we're not thinking about it, and we're not trying to attract talent. Now, there's a reason for that. You know, a lot of our leaders, a lot of our organizations are overburdened because a lot of times they don't get the support that they should get because they don't know how to market themselves and position themselves to get that support. With that said, there are resources out here, and many of us have to start beginning to think about succession planning going forward.
Yeah, and some of the folks who haven't passed the baton to us haven't passed it because they feel like they just got it. And also, they don't feel secure in their current position, and they want to just get as many more years in as possible to just like kind of make sure that their, that their bank account is, singing the right tune before they decide to retire.
Right. And it's going on, people listen to me, not just in Philly, but, around the country. So, and this isn't just specific to Philadelphia. It's going on around the country, sadly.
Yeah.
So we're going to open this up to questions and answers. Lawanda, while we're waiting for some questions, well, I just jacked that all up again. You got me nervous, Lawanda. Put your questions in the comment section. They will pop up on the screen, and we will share them.
Will I be able to see them?
I believe you should. While we're waiting for that, Lawanda, please give your contact information and anything you have going on, because I know you have an event coming up pretty soon, right?
Yeah, so Mission Incorporated is located in the 5500 block of Germantown Avenue. Our website is www.missionincdevelopment.com. We also have a Mission Incorporated Facebook page and a page for our radio show that comes on FM on Wednesdays at 1 called The Missing Branch. So The Missing Branch, again, is on Facebook. You can follow that. You could actually listen to previous shows. We currently are running an 8-episode series on entrepreneurship, which is relevant, entrepreneurship and social entrepreneurship.
And I didn't get a call.
Huh? Oh, well, I'm not done with the series yet.
Well, you got to plug yourself every chance you get, right?
Yeah, so we're doing an 8-episode series on that. We were hoping to get some entrepreneurs in for the last episode to kind of talk about what it was like to start in their particular industry. It's all sold out as of this interview, but we had a Art of the Start, how to start a nonprofit or small business training at State Rep Stephen Kinsey's office next Thursday at 6. I'm telling y'all, like, y'all can come, but we're having another one of those at the end of April here at our offices. So just if you go to missionincdevelopment.com, you can actually request to be added to our mailing list so you can know when all future trainings on fundraising and grant writing and starting a nonprofit will be happening.
Cool. I think we probably answered everybody's questions through our dialogue.
Okay.
Doesn't look like there's any questions. So,
yeah.
Again, if anybody has any questions,
grant writing?
Yeah, I'm shocked.
We probably need our own like fundraising and grant writing. What do you call it? Conversation, because I think that would probably bring about some more questions.
Well, I'm down to do that. Definitely down to do that.
And they're gonna all ask you questions after this is over. So there'll be the questions will be lining up probably in the door.
Well, I mean, since you brought it up, what is the one thing that a nonprofit should do to get ready to start fundraising?
Oh, they should have a budget. So like a lot
they're broke. They're fresh out.
No. They need to be able to create a budget of what their organization actually needs to run. So even if they have no money,
they're doing it all from the muscle.
Doesn't matter. They have to be able to demonstrate that they understand how much things cost. And how, because they're about to go out and ask for money for these things, they didn't even research how much these things cost, or how many of them they need, right?
Oh, so you mean they
So
need to treat it like a business and do research?
yeah, if I said to you, Kamari, I need money, and you were like, what for? And I was like, a little bit of this, a little bit of that. You're probably gonna be like, I don't know about that. But if I said, Kamari, my office currently serves 12 youth, but it's 90 degrees in here. I'm gonna be purchasing 4 fans. Those fans cost $20 a piece. I was wondering if I could get a contribution from you of $20 to support the cost of one of those fans.
Forget it.
Now,
Wait, you need air conditioning.
I mean, this is what our dude, who I mentioned earlier, is not doing. He has yet to, Dr. Umar, he has yet to show.
I know who you were talking about.
I'm just saying, this is his mistake is a common one. He has yet to show he's collected the money first and then failed to answer the questions later, right?
Well,
When I
I
think
mean, just for the
nobody,
record, just in case if anybody watches this, I think what Dr. Umar is talking about doing in terms of Black boys is commendable.
yeah,
But
absolutely.
there are some things that need to be done on the business side to make sure that it's able to launch and able to be sustainable.
Mm-hmm.
Part of the reason why he's getting such backlash is because he hasn't done those things.
Yeah.
And I'm not really into bashing folks, and I know Lawanda's not bashing, right? We just
Yeah,
talk,
yeah.
right? We're just talking, but this is part of the reason why he's getting backlash. So let's say, for all intents and purposes, that Dr. Umar has the perfect intentions and then he's doing everything right. He's not showing that those intentions are pure by not being transparent
Yeah.
with some of his stuff.
And I think that donors, on the other hand, too, they also need to be people who don't just give their money up to things without asking for that kind of stuff. And we have to stop saying that because I ask for additional information, it means that I'm not here for you. I'm asking for additional information because it's responsible for me to do so in the management of my money and of my household. And so if what I would feel much better about donating to something where someone could show me, okay, this is exactly how I'm planning to use the money. These are the vendors that I've reached out to. They've given me these 4 different prices. I'm going with the guy in the middle because, his fans are of higher quality, despite the fact that they're a few dollars more.
Right.
Like, showing that I've done that research. You're not going to access grants, get government contracts, or get support from large donors without that kind of stuff. That's why I say the budget.
Without that process, at
Yeah,
least that thought
budget and
process.
budget detail for your program is the number one thing you need to start fundraising.
And I mean, people need to think about this like a steward. Stewardship is one of my most favorite words. And so if you're going to be a steward of these funds for this program for these people, because you're like a double steward almost, right? You have to think about being accountable to the people that gave you the money as well, because it ain't your money. It's
Mm-hmm.
it's not your money. So you have to be willing to again be transparent and show what you're doing with the money, where it's going, and document it. So Alicia Cooper said procurement workshops will be great.
Yeah.
And then we actually have a question. How can I start a nonprofit to protect tenants from shady landlords? From Cleve Warren. I hope I'm saying it right.
I would say just do it. We do have access to resources at Mission Incorporated. We can help you with all of the startup paperwork that would be required. You definitely would want to make sure that your purpose was charitable. It sounds like it is. But you'd also want to make sure that you're the right person to do that, right? That you have done the research and that you're ready to enter into the field. That if you don't already have a background in it, you should at least have a passion for it and for getting up to speed on
A willingness
everything.
to learn.
You wouldn't believe the number of people out there handing out business cards for businesses they've actually never tried out, and that you're going to be their first customer.
And one thing I would add also, Cleve, I don't know where you're at in the country, but you can also reach out to other nonprofits that are already established doing that same thing that you're doing. And oftentimes they're willing to share information because they're passionate about that particular subject or, protecting that group of people. So many times it's just about finding other folks who've already done it, who have already done it before or are currently doing it now, and accessing them as well. And that could be as simple as an email or a phone call. Oh, you've been doing it for 20 years. Where are you at? Where are you located at? And are you doing it as a nonprofit now or are you as a for-profit? Oh, he's in the Apple, NYC. Okay.
New York.
So any other things on the horizon? So you said we need to talk about fundraising some more. Anything else?
Yeah, I mean, we're just, I would say folks should just definitely keep checking our website, www.missionincdevelopment.com, periodically. And I can possibly try to comment that unless you can comment it so that it's in the comments, the website.
What?
Put the website in the comments.
Mm-hmm.
I'm on a phone and I'm afraid it will fall. But definitely checking back there because we have a number of trainings coming up this year. Nonprofit fundraising is coming up.
Mission Inc., right?
Missionincdevelopment.com. We have grant writing coming up. We have board development coming up. So just go back to our website just to see when those trainings will be happening.
You know what? I'm glad you brought that. So we're going to close out on this. Board development. What should board development entail? I'm so glad you brought that up.
Wait, what was the question? What's my board development?
What should board development entail?
Okay. Board development should entail recruiting roughly 5 to 7 people. Obviously, nonprofit boards of directors cannot be compensated. They can be reimbursed for their for expenditures related to doing things for the organization, but they don't get salaries. They're volunteers. So you want to construct a board of people who are both passionate about the issue, but also have the energy and the time to commit to it. Something that I see a lot is nonprofit boards that are not engaged. You're more likely to have a board that's lazy and not engaged than have one that ousts you. So a lot of people are worried about like forming boards because they're worried about being removed from their leadership. And don't get me wrong, I've seen that happen too. We actually have had to resolve and mediate conflicts with founders who
call that founder's disease.
Yeah, founders who never put themselves on the board or anything. And so they technically didn't have any kind of leadership or legal position. And so the board was like, peace. And they were like, no, I'm the founder. And they were like, but you ain't nobody because you're not actually on the board. You don't have a vote. So a lot of founders were surprised to realize that without them having a seat on the board, they really are just the person who founded the organization. So I'd say find a diverse set of skill sets, preferably people that you can't afford to hire, who have skill sets you can't afford to pay for right now. Recruit those individuals. I think college students actually make terrific prospects for your board because they're trying to build resumes, and they tend to, as long as you can be really sort of organized as far as schedule and stuff is concerned, and when meetings are, they usually can work around their class and other responsibilities to attend. But you're just going to get a lot of energy out of students and out of people who are retired when it comes to boards, and everybody in between is going to be arriving late with a chicken wing in their hand and emotionally emotionally hardly there, and all kinds of stuff. So just
Well, I think a lot of that will depend upon the founder, the energy that the founder brings,
Mm-hmm.
and the passion that everybody has for whatever the mission is of the organization.
Yeah.
But social loafing is a real term. It's a real thing, and it happens in every organization. I mean, there's always usually a few people who do most of the work.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But the other thing I would ask, can you define what type of boards? Because there's different types of boards, right? So you have working boards, and you have fundraising boards. For lack
Mm-hmm.
of a better term, can you run that down as well?
Yeah, you have a couple of different what they call governance models, and so some boards will be working boards because there are no staff. So you're more likely to find a working board where the organization can't afford to hire staff yet. So your working board is going to be just that. You don't want to hire those people whose lives are too busy to be on a working board because this is the only way your organization gets anything done. So I would say like a working board should have a lot of those retirees and a lot of those students and stuff on it because work needs to get done. All boards should be taking up the responsibility of fundraising, but some organizations may structure their board to only have fundraising responsibilities. One of the key roles of a board member is to be providing the organization with money or connections. And so you'll find that a lot of boards like Kimmel Center and other places, they're stacked with people who are influential in the city in other ways. And so they may be able to help get the organization access to media coverage, access to opera tickets to give to their highest donor, things like that. You really want to, if you're going to use your board as a high fundraising board, then you want to make sure you have that built into how you guys operate. So you might want to have like a minimum contribution each board member has to give. There are grant funders who actually will ask you what percentage of your board contributes to the organization. And if that answer is not high, then, you're probably not getting that grant.
Right,
Because why should they give if the people on your own board aren't giving?
right,
So there's that, and then there are like boards that exist mainly for the purpose of governance to check the organization at the end of the year and see if it met the goals that were set out earlier in the year, and that take on a role of making sure the bylaws are being followed. That's like a high governance board,
hmm
and also like take on the responsibility of nominating new board members, which in some organizations can be a really in-depth process.
right. Depending on the profile of the organization.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, all these things are important. We didn't want to open the fire hose, but again, I still think this is a really, really important subject for us to talk about, especially in our community, because again, there are a lot of things that go on due to a nonprofit, and a lot of people don't realize it. And I always complain about there being an overlap in nonprofits. And so sometimes we create these overlaps because we don't know what's going on out in the overall landscape to do our research. Other part of that reason is due to what Lawanda was talking about earlier in terms of succession planning and people not wanting to turn over the torch. So sometimes you get these duplicate organizations. They do the same things. They're competing for the same dollars. They're competing for the same volunteers. And at the end of the day, the only people that lose are the people who are actually in need of the service. So for whatever reason it is, start to pay attention to some of these things, especially as it relates to your community and some of the nonprofits that you're involved in. Any closing thoughts, Lawanda?
I would have to say just, another sort of caveat for folks is to make sure that when they are filing paperwork, they understand what paperwork they're filing and what it means. I've heard a lot of people talk to me about my nonprofit got its LLC. Well, start over because
Why? Why do you have to start over?
because because nonprofit organizations are always INC. And so if you're like, I have a nonprofit, it's called such and such LLC, and you filed the LLC paperwork, you're going to have to call someone like myself, undo the LLC, and file the appropriate corporate paperwork for your organization. So, like, these things mean things, and just being like, oh, I'm a nonprofit, I got my EIN, like, that's not enough. You have other things you have to file. So, like, just knowing and like all and not listening to what everyone else is doing all the time, because even the kind of thing that you're going to be doing can alter what has to be done to comply. So you need to be working with professionals, and if you know what you don't know, in other words, I've had to undo a lot of paperwork, and they're mad at me because they already paid Juanita, and like it's I don't know why they're mad at me, but they are, because I'm the
Well, they
second
mad because they got to
person.
pay. They got to pay.
I'm the
That's
second person they have to pay.
yeah.
So yeah.
Well, we got one more question. Last question. It's up on the screen now. If a nonprofit is established for the purpose of manufacturing and distribution of a product, what's the best method to recruit a board if there aren't many Black people involved in this area?
I guess I would have to say I'm a little confused about the purpose of manufacturing and distribution of a product, because um, that doesn't sound like a nonprofit to me.
It could be.
The purpose needs to be, I think, like
Oh, I get what you're right. Right. I'm sorry. You're right.
I
You're right.
don't. So I'm afraid to answer that question in that way, because if I were to just read the words, the purpose of manufacturing and distributing a product, that sentence would be denied as a nonprofit by the IRS, because those words would not
So
categorize them as a charitable tax exempt organization.
so let's create a hypothetical using that same question, right? So there's a nonprofit organization out there that does training to low wage earners, helping them to develop a skill. One of
Mm-hmm.
the skills they teach is manufacturing and distribution of a product.
Okay.
I'm trying and I'm trying.
Okay.
So then they're having a hard time recruiting on the board. I'm guessing, okay, the company will be training the youth in that area, training the youth in
Oh,
that area to do what?
training is the key word right
Right,
there.
right.
And
And that,
making sure that that's definitely in any kind of like communications around a nonprofit. So if the organization is training youth in that area, what's the question again now? The second part of it?
all right, so it's training the youth. I'm assuming they're teaching them a skill.
Mm-hmm.
So if a nonprofit is established with the purpose of manufacturing distribution, we know the purpose is now training youth
To
with a skill
manufacture and
to
distribute
manufacture.
the
Right,
product.
right. What's the best method to recruit a board member if there aren't many Black people involved in this area?
Yeah, that's tough. I mean, you definitely want people who have um some knowledge of the industry, but all board members that you have don't have to be people who have knowledge in the industry that you're providing services in.
Right.
Hopefully you have enough knowledge in that industry to be running a nonprofit doing it, meaning your board could be comprised of maybe someone not of color who has knowledge of that industry, but then people of color in accounting and marketing and all of the other things that your board needs. And that way you can keep that level of diversity that's important. And a lot of the funders are moving in the diversity and inclusion direction right now. So you can keep that diversity. But it's okay to have, like, a white
It's okay
lady
that it's okay
manufacturing.
that your board isn't all Black. That's okay.
Yeah, that's
And I
okay.
said it, and I know I might get some backlash for it, but it's okay. We had to be strategic about this.
Yeah, it's better to have the skill sets that are needed.
Right.
But like I said, if this person has that skill set, then they don't really need another person unless that person can add something else to the organization, like access to potential distributors or or like equipment. If that person can provide access, bring them on. But
Right.
if they're not going to do anything but the same thing that you already know how to do, then you don't really need to recruit, others.
Right. Well, okay, everybody. I got to get ready for my mastermind call, my Stock Market Rebels group. So we got to conclude this. I'm glad everybody was on. Thank you for joining us this evening. Thank you for joining us for another episode of the Stock Market Rebels. I apologize because I haven't been on as much as I would like to be. Tax season is kicking my butt, but that's a good problem to have, right? So we'll be back soon. In the meantime, if there's any subject area you want me to cover, feel free to send me a DM or drop a comment in this link and let me know. Also, feel free. We have the Finance Rebel Academy. It's free. We have a book club there, right? One of the best ways to increase our financial literacy is to get around and hang around and talk to people who are also looking to increase their financial literacy as well. So you can find the Finance Rebel Academy on Facebook. All you got to do is search and come on in, and we'll get ready for the next book club meeting. Until the next time, everybody, have a great evening. Again, thank you for joining us.
Okay, bye.